welcome to the fourth episode of Borderline Genius. I'm your host, Anthony Pagnato, with my good friend and co-host, Kenton Grimes, on our show, where we like to talk about global trade events, happenings in the maritime industry, and all things supply chain related. And boy, has there been a lot to talk about lately, right, Kenton?
Well, we have ran the gauntlet of tariffs, that's for sure.
I like to say, as I was driving out of my driveway this morning, spring is in the air and the tariffs are sprouting like the tulips in my backyard and front yard, which is good for my tulips. I don't know if it's good for everything else, but it's been an interesting couple of weeks here, and it's good to be back on with you today. I had the privilege of being in Germany last week, and I want to go ahead and break the news that our wonderful show, Borderline Genius, is now internationally known. I was greeted as a celebrity and amongst a very select group of people in Germany. And I want to give a shout out to our biggest fan, the German party animal. He will know who he is. Thank you very much for his listening and support. Pretty exciting to be known outside of these four walls that I'm in. So it's pretty exciting news. That being said, Germany, beautiful country and a very interesting place to be. While all of this was going on, I was there during the week of the reciprocal ups and downs, and I'll kind of run through here. Our goal for today is to really talk about a few quick topics. Reciprocal tariffs, the reciprocal tap dance, the reciprocal rundown, whatever you want to call it. It's been an interesting time, and I'm really excited to get your views there, Kenton, and hear what you've got to share with our team. It was very strange being in Germany during this up and down period. We also want to talk about what we're hearing in the market. You and I talked to a lot of shippers. There's a lot of different opinions. There's a lot of varying opinions. We just want to share some of what we're hearing out in the shipping community. We had some big news come through last night. Our third main topic. The USTR published the proposed rules around how Chinese ships will be levied for docking at U.S. ports. So we want to share some of that information and walk through some calculations that we've done. Cocktail napkin math at best. Or neither of us drink cocktails, so maybe kombucha napkin math. There you go. Homebrew. And then lastly, we'll use Kenton's brain to talk about how we can support our clients and friends in finding some tariff mitigation strategies in this stressful time. So thanks for joining us. Kenton, how you doing today, bud?
I'm doing well. I mean, it's we're coming up on Easter weekend. Can't, like you said, the tulips in your yard are coming up. I'm not familiar with the flowers my wife planted, but I do see them coming up. Maybe they're crocuses. I don't know. I'm just randomly guessing at the kind of flower that might be coming out.
Crocus. That's the word for the day. Crocus. All these tariffs might just crocus. Oh man. Let's talk about the reciprocal rundown, as I've been calling it, or the reciprocal rigmarole, or whatever other alliterative set of words you want to use. It was a weird week, and you had made some predictions after the Rose Garden announcement, and we've definitely seen some changes. Talk to us, Kenton. What's going on out there?
So we saw the initial announcement in the Rose Garden. We saw the calculation methodology be published by the administration. We saw a suspension of the full implementation of the reciprocal tariffs, and not counting the Chinese reciprocal, which escalated and elevated. But every other nation who had a designated rate was suspended for the next 90 days at the 10% get off. So every India, Vietnam, Cambodia, any other nation, EU, whatever their rate was supposed to accelerate to after 5 days, they are still stuck at 10%, and that is on a 90-day hiatus. Now, China, we saw run from 34 to 84 and 125 as of most recently. So those tariff rates compound with the Section 301 that exists, with the IEPA that exists, and then you have additional tariffs that were not announced, but we all know that are in fact the Section 232 tariffs, both on steel, aluminum, and their derivatives. And then we also saw the rollout of the official announcement of the automotive 232, which don't technically go into effect until May, but we have the full listing. We saw announcements on reciprocal investigation, or not reciprocal, 232 investigations on copper, 232 investigation on lumber and lumber derivatives, 232 investigation on pharmaceuticals, and then semiconductors, and also most recently rare earth minerals. So there's a laundry list of tariffs on the horizon, and we're still waiting to see what happens with the full continuation of the reciprocal tariffs. And
it's extremely difficult to calculate and I apologize for jumping in there. It's extremely difficult to calculate what your tariff liability may be if you're bringing in multiple products from multiple origin points. We've been having a lot of conversations with our clients about bond saturation, right? Mm-hmm. And they're being asked to estimate their duty exposure over the next year. And it's a pretty trying question. Again, something that Mohawk Global is happy to help you out with. Please reach out. It's an area that I think we excel. But can you walk us through an example right now, Kenton, of let's call it toys from China? Don't contain steel, don't contain aluminum. Just maybe a plush toy coming from China, which used to be duty free, to my knowledge, right? For a long time. Can you walk us through an example of what might be stacking there and what we might be seeing right now?
Sure. So before I do that, I do need to have a mea culpa. I did go out on the limb on our last episode, and I said that there will be a completed agreement between India and the U.S. to mitigate the reciprocal tariffs. And I called the date. I called my shot. I said on Monday, we're going to see that announced.
You did?
We did not see that announced. The closest thing we've seen is that 75 of these countries who have been hit with reciprocal tariffs have, according to the administration, have reached out to begin negotiations. So I still believe India has something already worked out in principle, but I believe the administration, for whatever reason, is looking to roll out something larger and maybe utilizing that as a footprint for or a guide for the negotiations with the other nations. So I was wrong. I admit it. And, shame on me, but I couldn't help myself.
We're borderline genius. We're not very stable genius. There's a difference, right?
Very good.
There's only so much that we can see in there. I appreciate you owning up to that for our listeners. Though I do think that there's so many moving parts, and we know India is highly involved in the dialogue and looking to take advantage of the further decoupling from China. So I think you're on the right path. There's certainly smoke, if not fire yet. So talk to me. Let's go back to
the toys. So the toys.
So
you're looking at
toys. We're going to have Christmas, at some point, peak season for Christmas in the summer. What's going on with toys if we were shipping them today?
So here we are on Easter. We're supposed to be talking about chocolates, but we're talking about toys for Christmas. So toys, traditionally a duty-free article. Unfortunately, we have the Section 301 tariffs, which are 25%. We have the IEPA tariff, which is another 20%. So we're at 45. We have 125% for the reciprocal. So pardon my math, but that puts us at 170. So for every dollar you've spent as an importer on the product, you're spending $1.70 on the taxes and the tariffs to import it. That is cumbersome. And I think we are, as a freight forwarder and customs broker, we're seeing that played out in real time. Companies are putting the brakes quickly on shipments coming into the US. Whether they've already purchased the goods, whether it was an order that was pending. We've had containers delayed and asked to be warehoused in China and warehoused in different parts of the world, whether even in Canada, if it's already in the water, to try to mitigate that impact upon arrival into the US.
And let's come back to that. I think that's a huge point that we want to talk about, because I think that there's some knock-on effects that are really important to understand there. But for a toy, what was your final percentage? You said 100?
170.
170. 170. What if it was an item that was already had a 12% duty rate on it? Would it just be tacked on top of that? Is that how that works? Like if there was already a
182. Yep, tax right on top.
182. So the same toy now coming out of the EU is just 10%, right?
Just 10%. Yep.
Okay. So what about a piece of steel coming out of China? Because that's where I think things get a little confusing on the 232s.
Sure. So the interpretation that most of the industry has come to the understanding is the 232 has priority or trumps the reciprocal tariff. So it's 25% for steel. The reciprocal tariff does not apply. The IEEPA does apply, and Section 301 will apply. So you're looking at 70% in that regard. So you've got 25 for the 232, 25 for the 301, and then 20 for IEEPA.
Which is interesting to me, and I think you said it correctly, what the industry has come to interpret. But really, it's written in the plain language of the rule, right? Mm-hmm. So, but yet the outcome seems odd, right? That all this conversation about steel and aluminum, and we're going to almost double the tariff on a little plush toy than over a piece of steel or aluminum. So that I think the result feels a little weird, and that's why we say interpret it. But I think it's dead on. And I appreciate you walking our listeners through that and the stacking effect, and we'll continue to talk about this. The impact has been severe. I've seen estimates that 80% of the containerized freight traffic out of China has been put on hold, right? Which is what you were talking about. We're seeing it with our clients. We have seen clients take freight back out of ports that has already been in-gated, which is expensive, right? And it's something we can do. We are seeing them hold freight. And what's hard for me to get an understanding of right now, and I'm curious as to your perspective, is the length of time we might see this. And because there's two ways this could go in my mind. This is either we absolutely can't afford this, right? Mm-hmm. And this stops now, and we're hoping, or we think this policy is going to change relatively soon, and so we're just going to try to wait it out. And in fact, we did get some signaling from the administration, from the president himself last night, saying that he thinks a deal can be reached in 3 to 4 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks with China.
But he also said in that same statement that we have plenty of time.
Mm-hmm. I
don't know how much time I have.
Yeah.
But he has time. So.
No, I think I'm an optimist, and I think we will see some loosening of the tariffs. I don't know if I'm as bullish on the Chinese deal as the president, but I think it's difficult to believe the economic pressure in the US will not get to the administration. It just, to me, seems to be there's just too much in the means of inflationary pressure, as well as just, as we mentioned, Christmas is coming. We can't have the
Sure.
shelves bare like they were via COVID. That's just, I don't believe that that's a tenable situation and one that this administration could handle.
And that goes down to the question, and I think we've asked this in the country before in certain situations, but who can suffer longer, the Chinese people or the American people? And look, when push comes to shove, and if there's a real tragedy, I have no doubt in the ability of the American people to pull together and foster a sense of support and push through some things. But for something like this, it's hard to wrap our heads around the reasoning. It's hard to see the end game, right? And that's something I'll mention in a minute. I don't know if the U.S.
Be careful,
citizenry.
Marvel's going to sue us now. You use the
Oh
word
my
endgame.
God. Oh my goodness. If I could only snap and half the tariff would go away, right? Um, you know, I don't know that the American people have the willpower, and I'm curious to see it to withstand this. So it will be interesting to watch it unfold. I think, and I'm offering my opinion. I'm not going on the record here. I think we will see a rather rapid, 4 to 6 weeks. I think we'll see something happen again, but it's very hard to tell. And as you can tell, the as you saw with the back and forth on reciprocal tariffs, doesn't take too much for these two global leaders, China and the U.S., to fire back and forth at each other, right? So who knows who might offend who and what that may cause as a result. So I remain optimistic as well, but it's going to take a little time to know for sure. But going back to the client reaction piece, and the shippers, I've seen shippers all over the place. I've seen shippers that are continuing to ship. I've had shippers tell me that they have their business is in dire straits and they're not shipping at all, but they absolutely understand why the president is doing this and stand behind it, which is an admirable quality, I think, to have the courage of your convictions, right? Especially in the risk of your own business at sometimes. And we've seen clients just slam the brakes on everything and say, we're not budging until we get a little bit more certainty. And I think when I come back to that, that's where I get a little nervous, right? Is again, this tariff situation without the infrastructural development, where are these factories going to come from? Where is this going to come from? And I don't know if it's related to the U.S. government's inability to act beyond a 4-year time frame, right? Just inherently baked into our political system, or if it's just how we've been. But China didn't become a manufacturing powerhouse because the United States didn't want it to, right?
Right.
And so for me, there continues to be, and we'll talk about it again later, and when we talk about shipbuilding, there continues to be a lot of aggressive rhetoric blaming China for this, which seems a little disingenuous. There's things that they need to do, that they've acknowledged they need to do, such as intellectual property protection and things like that. There are legitimate issues out there, but the idea that if we're going to have a long-term tariff battle, that we have the resources or the ability to produce what China produces, even remotely propped up. I see no factory investment strategy, any industrial capacity development strategy. And I think that's the most concerning thing for me. Thoughts?
I agree with you completely. I don't understand the rhetoric. I believe that should any company in the U.S. want to make products in the U.S., it's not incumbent on them waiting for the government to greenlight it, but do it, right? It seems disingenuous to wholeheartedly desire to manufacture in the US and yet not do it on your own accord, but then, you know, shout from the mountaintops that it's a necessity when you had the full opportunity to do so on your own. I struggle with that. And in part, that's why I believe what we will find is a middle ground with China. I don't believe we will ever wind up with the Chinese tariffs at the standard rate. I believe they will always have a more, or at least under this administration, they will have a more punitive rate than the rest of the globe. Now,
but tolerable,
well,
economically tolerable, right?
Yeah, based on conversations with my clients prior to the election and forward, they all pretty much kind of said if we can keep that rate at 40%, at a cap of around 45%, we can still manage to bring products in and diversify our supply chain without crippling our companies.
Which is what it's all about. It's the chicken the egg thing, right? And we have the egg right now, but we don't have the chicken, or vice versa. So create an incentive, add cost to manufacturing in China to create an incentive to source domestically or elsewhere.
Sure.
I think it's not my preferred model, but it's a logical model, and it's one that I think is hard to argue with, right?
Yeah.
What else do you have on the client reactions? Anything else before we move into the world of ships?
Well, I mean, I've seen the people I feel most concerned for are our clients and other companies I talk to who are in your small to medium enterprise locations.
Sure.
I actually connected with a person recently who their business started off great. They got some notoriety on major publications and as well as major retailers, but now have a GoFundMe because the tariffs are impacting them in such a negative way. Their inventory, they just have no access to the inventory they've already purchased because they don't have the revenue to pay the tariffs. So these are problematic, and where my empathy kind of pours out into that, because it's especially a small medium enterprise. How many family businesses, how many families are hiring people who are supporting other families in that regard?
Sure.
So that's where I find the heavy stick methodology of the tariffs to be punitive to the American, not just the American consumer, but just to the American family.
I agree with you 100%. So let's hope, and this leads directly into a good next topic here, and something to remember for all of our clients and importers out there. At some point, there's going to be an end, right?
Oh yeah,
things will get better. I don't know what that will look like, but right now we've seen, again, an estimated 80% drop in the freight coming out of China. A lot of canceled shippings, postponed shippings, freight sitting out there ready to go. We have no direct timeline, but we know that there's been many blank sailings announced. That there's I mean, basically containerized shipping from China has, for all intents and purposes, ground to a halt. And we have the potential for an uncorking at some time when an agreement is reached. And does anybody remember the phrase that was used often around the COVID era shipping, which was very recently, bullwhip? Do we remember the bullwhip?
The bullwhip effect, yes.
Yeah. And so something to watch out there for all of our clients and people, especially walking into deals right now and contract season. We're almost up, and I know a lot of contracts haven't been signed because of this.
Right.
Is are we looking at $16,000 container rates again when things open up? Are we looking at $8,000 container rates, or we're looking at severe capacity constraints on the trade, right? The carriers have now an incentive to slow roll capacity back into the market to make up for the revenue they're losing right now, right?
Right.
And so I expect to see some seriously expensive container rates. Yet, if you think about it, $16,000 on a container is nothing compared to the $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 that we're seeing on potential duties, right?
Yeah.
So if freight starts to move, I think the shipping public needs to be well aware that we could see that bullwhip pricing effect, and capacity shortages, serious congestion, and all the good things that come when the supply and demand of containerized traffic is set out of whack. So something to talk about.
So are you wanting to say that we are facing a tariff pandemic?
I don't know. I'm hesitant to use the word pandemic ever again in my life. So, but potentially, I think we might be deep into the pandemic of tariffs. So, but let's hope that we find a vaccine.
If nothing else, we'll have this new shipbuilding port fee epidemic to deal with. So
make American shipbuilding amazing again. There was an executive order issued to the USTR and many other organizations to investigate the fact that 90% of the container, I think that was the number you gave me earlier, right? About 90% of the container ships
are non-US, yeah.
Are Chinese, which is a heavy drop off. They used to be seriously Japanese. There used to be a lot of Korean, and we've just seen an explosion in Chinese container ships. And that brings us to our third topic, right? Is the USTR has finally come out and announced some fees. And Kenton has been kind enough to do some kombucha napkin math for us to see what those could be and kind of walk through the process of how we're getting those. But the USTR has come out and published $50 per net weight ton, right?
Per net weight ton, yes.
As the first effective when? Do you know off the top of your head?
So the first round is effective October 14th of 2025. So that's round one at $50 per net ton.
And I'd be remiss to not call out that there were over 500 comments on this proposed, fees on ship docking in the United States. And it appears they've been listened to some extent, because this feels like, though, an aggressive plan, a much less aggressive plan than originally discussed. And the reason I call it an aggressive plan is because I don't understand how you're supposed to stand up a shipyard and buy an American ship in 90 days or 120 days even. But yet we do have a rollout of fees that go from October to all the way out to the highest amount is when, Kenton?
And so it seems like there's an incremental increases every half year. So October 14th of 25 is $50 per net ton. April of 2026 is $80 per net ton. And then we skip and go to April of 27, and that's 110 per net ton. And then we ramp up again April of 2028, and that's $140 per net ton. So everyone out there is probably going, what does that mean per container? And
I'm saying, what does that mean for shipbuilding stocks?
Well, yeah. I guess wait for those NFTs and the IPOs for shipbuilding companies to start up, and maybe that's your next investment.
But net ton, it's easy to find the gross tonnage of a ship, right? If we go into a ship, most of the steamship lines will tell us the gross tonnage of their container ship. Net tonnage is a little weirder, right?
Net tonnage is a little weirder. It's a strange formula, but I'm glad for Excel, and I'm glad that my eighth grade math teacher, Miss Lingler's, not listening right now, because she would just be like, Kenton, you went into sales because you can't do math. What are you doing? But I did learn how to use Excel. So Excel does the math for me.
And I would say that the net weight, the net tonnage, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason that's important in this calculation, it's already how fees are assessed for port fees and things like that.
Right.
That's essentially a measurement of the revenue generating capacity of a ship, and very much layman's terms. there's a lot of resources out there to look that up. There's a lot of ways to measure ships.
Sure.
And we've used an approximation formula, correct?
Right. It's an assumption on available volume that's used to maintain buoyancy so that a vessel can, be profitable. So yeah, we used some overall estimates and looking at the net ton in relation to volume in the vessel. And that's where we get some of the numbers. And just looking at the $50 per net ton fee, I took a random sampling of vessels ranging in TEU capacity as high as 21,000 and as low as 13,800. And in that group of sampling, we have for a 40-foot container about $400 will be added on, and then for a 20-foot half, so $200.
Excuse me.
And that's what we're looking at in the rollout this fall. So trick or treat, your prices are going to go up. And then
but interestingly, Kenton, that per container is only if the vessel. So we have no idea how the steamship lines are going to actually apply this fee
correct
to importers, right? Because the number you just gave presumes that the vessel is 100% laden, which they aren't, right?
Right.
And then it assumes it doesn't take into account the fact that a vessel is charged under this new proposed rule the first 5 times it touches a U.S. port, and it's not a per port fee anymore. It's a per time call in the U.S. I think that's a big concession that was made.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're talking about charging per ship 5 times that it calls on any U.S. port.
Right.
Right. And after that, it doesn't pay anymore. So there's a limit and there's a cap. But the dollar figures on some of these initial sailings are potentially pretty high.
Yeah, I mean, I will say that, as you mentioned before, it's a metered approach when you consider $50 per ton at the low end, and then as we get to 2028, the fee is far more oppressive at $140 per ton. So I guess let's not belabor the fact. Let's not go through each year of, so the low rate we're looking at approximately 400 for a 40-foot container. But when we get to $140 a ton, we're looking at about $1,100 a 40-foot container. Again, with the same assumptions, fully laden and the like. That's going to be quite punitive when we consider that. So I'm curious to see how this rolls out, mostly because all we have is the announcement of what the USTR proposes.
Sure.
We don't yet have an executive order or legislation. So I'm curious, when you're ballparking pricing into the next election, what is is this something that's going to stay in the manner that it's initially proposed, or are we going to see something change? It's hard
in the
to
way
tell.
it's currently drafted. If it were to be magically signed into law as it's drafted tomorrow, which it won't be, there's a bit of a perverse incentive in there if you're a steamship line, right?
Right.
Let's say it's a low volume point. U.S. shipping hasn't recovered. You've moved smaller vessels into the trans-Pacific trade. You're paying a smaller fee. You're serving your clients. As demand ramps up, if those small vessels have already all hit a U.S. port 5 times, right?
Right.
Do you bring a larger vessel into the trade, expose that hasn't touched? Maybe it's been on the Asia-Europe or Asia-South America, right? Trade. You bring a larger ship back into the trade, expose yourself to 5 more hits of this fee, or do you keep the smaller ships in the trade, let demand rise, let the ocean freight costs rise, and so it's a little bit of a weird shakeout how that could possibly go. I'll have to read a lot more in detail. Again, we just started getting this out last night, but there's a lot of curious artifacts in there. And I think the bottom line is, one, to bottom line this for everyone, just like, in Game of Thrones, winter's coming, the fees are coming, right? These ships are going to be taxed for calling on the United States. 2, There definitely appears to have been some listening to the comments. They don't appear to be the rules don't appear initially to be as oppressive as we originally heard from the current administration, but they're not small, and we've yet to see how steamship lines will apply them or even consider applying them to importers. So it could be interesting.
It'll be very interesting. I wonder what might, again, this is really just speculative, but you've got two steamship lines who are not primary steamship lines in the US, one Matson and the other is Crowley, who operate a lot of Jones Act cargo between Crowley runs a lot of Florida to Puerto Rico, and Matson does a lot of Hawaii to the US, Hawaii to LA. But Matson did expand their breadth into China during COVID. I wonder if there will be some unique hub and spoke opportunities with those companies that have US vessels, which would be immune to these port fees.
I think you will, but if you see something like that, there will no doubt be a premium attached, right? The vessels are too small, right? The vessels are too small to support the trade. They're fast, which is nice, but they'll definitely, and quite frankly, if somebody else is paying an extra $1,000 to bring their vessel to the U.S. and one of these companies doesn't have to, why wouldn't they make a little extra money, right? That's what we see in the trade all the time. So that's an interesting point.
Yeah, I mean, Crowley's one of the only vessel construction companies that I'm familiar with still. They're operating and they're making some smaller maritime vessels because they also ship up into Alaska from I think it's right there in Oregon. I think it's coming out of there.
Yeah, we have over 100 shipbuilding facilities in the United States. Doesn't feel like it, does it?
No. Well, I mean, got to make a bunch of tugboats, I guess. Yeah.
All right.
Now they've got to ramp up and do something a little bit bigger.
And this goes back to the earlier conversation we were having about the rhetoric, right? There's a lot of blaming China for this, and there is a risk. I can see the risk, right? China has a very strong shipbuilding, dual purpose shipbuilding infrastructure, right? Where they're able to turn out ships for trade or ships for war.
Right.
We had let that erode, but it was a conscious decision in 1981, right? We pulled back. Ronald Reagan pulled back financial support for the shipbuilding industry, amongst others. And we saw that go elsewhere. We spent a lot of time buying ships from Korea, Japan, and now China as a society.
Right.
And I heard Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump earlier this year proposing a $1 trillion Department of Defense budget. Would be the record Department of Defense budget for the year. And part of me wonders if this is for national defense, why we have to pay yet another tax to support the shipbuilding industry. If this is national defense, let's take it out of that $1 trillion budget and start building ships. I have no problem with that. Let's build ships. But the kind of antagonism of one of our long-term trading partners that goes along with that, as if they did something wrong, right. Is pretty strange to me. But more to come on this for sure.
For sure.
And go ahead, please.
Oh no, I was just in agreement with you. I think this is the tip of the iceberg. I'm curious to see what the Titanic strikes, because there's more to be uncovered.
Absolutely. And as we tail off here, we've already gone over our normal time that we try to shoot for. Kenton and I talk too much. Just for those of you that don't know us, we'd love to get a cup of coffee with you, but book an hour. We'll sit down and we'll say we'll talk for 30 minutes, but it always goes a little long because I really do enjoy this. I think Kenton, we want to leave with some more thoughts on what you as a licensed customs broker, trade compliance professional, see as opportunities for our customers or potential customers. Give us a call, please hit us up on LinkedIn, come to our website, ask to connect. What are some things that you see out there that can, help our clients not or minimize some of the impact of these tariffs? I'll throw the obvious one out.
Yeah.
Don't pay tariffs on duties or
On your freight. Yeah.
on your freight, right? On your freight. Don't pay duties on your freight, which is a big issue we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's interesting. If you surf LinkedIn, if you surf some of these other places, you'll see a lot of I call them Pinterest logistics, people who are trying to do it themselves, and you get some really bad advice.
Yes.
There's a rush to DDP terms again, which people don't recognize that the U.S. consignee still bears risk and both civilly and commercially, and legally, it's not a position you want to be in. And it really does not save you on the tariffs. Just because the non-resident importer or the shipper will be the importer of record here and officially pay the duties owed, all that's rolled into the cost of goods, so you're not avoiding that at all. And secondly,
or it's done illegally,
or it's done with you're trusting a foreign entity to have full knowledge of U.S. trade law. Probably not the best bet. How well do you know the trade law in any other foreign nation? Let's just let's start there. So that's one method that I am not advocating for. I appreciate the thought, but it's a little bit it lacks the sophistication of the problem. Just like tariffs are not a panacea to solve all global trade problems, DDP is not a panacea to solve the tariff-geddon, or whatever we want to give it a jazzy word. The tariff rising of tulips, whatever Anthony said earlier. But you
got to listen to me better, man.
The crocuses. The thing to consider is valuation. So what I'm recommending importers do is to take a really strong look at what they are paying for. What are the direct costs in the production of your product, and what are services that the shipper is providing you that has rolled into the cost of the products? It's possible some of those costs are non-dutiable based on some trade law, based on rulings that have existed. It's a good time to get with a trade professional to discuss what you are paying for, to ensure you are paying duties on what is dutiable and not paying duties on services and things that are not a dutiable valuation. So that is not, again, I can't guarantee a percentage of savings, and anyone who can is lying to you. But it is operating with reasonable care and doing your due diligence to ensure that your processes and your procurement plan benefits you more than just saving a penny per unit. You're really looking at becoming more sophisticated, improving your efficiencies, improving your scale.
Wow.
And
go ahead.
I was gonna say, and there's some simple solutions in cash flow benefits. If you have discounts for paying timely, if you have discounts for volume orders, those are often considered. Those discounts are often allowable to reduce your duty burden. So it's, again, goes down to what is the actual price paid or payable. So these are things that we can help you look at. Reach out. Let's get on a call and try to help mitigate the exposure you have to the tariffs.
And I'm hugely biased, bigly biased, right? There's nobody better than Kenton Grimes to do this. This is his Super Bowl. We've been keeping him locked in the office and sliding food underneath the crack under the door for him to keep him going. This man knows trade and knows how to keep you responsibly and like you said, responsibly paying the correct amount of duty, valuing your freight properly, and taking advantage of the laws out there, right? That let you potentially lower that valuation, which is the key to driving down your duty exposure. And there's nobody you'd rather talk to than Kenton Grimes. Don't go it alone. It's a dangerous path.
Yeah. You know, I recommend one YouTube channel. That's ours.
Borderline genius. Kenton, you want to take us out? It's been a great day. You want to wrap us, man? Do you want to?
Well, thank you all for joining us on this conversation. Thank you for the opportunity to celebrate my Super Bowl victory with each of you. The reality is my Super Bowl is next week. That's the NFL draft, and I'm a Browns fan, so we always celebrate the draft here. But
cry the day after. It's usually a very short.
Oh yeah,
short celebration.
Well, short celebration, but we do celebrate something.
Yes.
And now, thank you again, Anthony, for allowing coming up with the agenda items and getting us on point with our conversation today. And I look forward to each one of you commenting on YouTube or looking us up on LinkedIn and Spotify. We appreciate your interaction and involvement in the channel. And don't forget to like and subscribe.
Thank you so much.